Hello, this is Gary again, and I have another video for you today. Today I will be talking about removing the binding on your coloring books and why I do it and how to do it, so you don't end up with a big mess like I did the first time I removed the binding from a coloring book. So let's get started. So before we start, I'm going to talk to you about why I removed the binding, and it's actually pretty straightforward. The reason that I removed the binding is that originally what I would do is I would remove the binding after I was finished coloring, and what I would end up is sometimes things like this where the page would end up damaged as I was removing the binding afterwards, or as I was cutting the page. So this was done with the Caran d'Ache Luminance. So before I started doing this, I did remove the binding, and I found that when you do that, instead of cutting it afterwards, you get the absolute cleanest possible removal that way. If you want to remove them, if you don't want to remove them, you don't have to. You can just keep them in the book. But I find that removing them and putting them in something like this is really cool because it lets me, store them here, have them, away from the light, and then they stay like fresh and vibrant, and it's a lot easier too because I can put the fixative on it and not damage the other pages in the book, things like that. So I find that removing them and putting them in something like this to be just really helpful, and hopefully over time I will have a full book with all sorts of stuff that I have colored from all these different books, and then in the back it just says the name of the book and the artist. So let's get started. So first things first is there are two main kinds of bindings that are used in these books, and I'm going to show you how to recognize which kind of bindings and then how to remove them from the binding. How to remove them from the binding. So I'm going to take a quick break and then I'll be right back. So the two different kinds of books that I have seen for coloring books are this kind right here, which, let's see if, sorry about that, this might be difficult for the computer to focus. This kind right here, which is just glue, and this other kind, which is a little bit more difficult to remove, which is glue and what looks like little mini books. And one way to tell the difference is either from looking at the side like this or from opening it up. If you open it up, and usually you can really see the sewing in there, and then you can look, and that's how you find the middle pages. And there's a name for this. There's a bunch of people who do book binding for fun, and there's a name for this kind of binding, but I don't remember what the name of it is. But anyway, so you can go to the middle page, and the way you see it is you can actually see the stitching. Sometimes it will be in a matching color, and sometimes it'll be in a contrasting color, and you can actually see the stitching that binds the book together. So this is the harder kind to unbind, and we're going to do that one second. We're going to do this one first because this is the easier kind to unbind. And I wasn't really going to unbind this book just yet, but I decided to do it for the video. I do use this book a lot for the colored pencil reviews, as well as for various kinds of tutorials, because this book is pretty easy to use for that. So for this book is actually probably the easiest one to do. Is you just want to get some pressure in there and just do that a few pages in there throughout the book. So so I'm gonna pause and do that a little bit. Just it doesn't have to be in any particular way, but you want to kind of flatten it out a little bit. It'll make it a lot easier. All right. So now that you've done a little bit of stretching, it should look a little bit like this. So it's not going to fold as flat, and that's kind of what you want, and that will be the easiest way to do it. Now this first page is often adhered quite closely, so I usually don't even bother with this first page, and instead just focus on removing as cleanly as I can the top of the binding right here. And you can see with a book like this, it's actually not going to be too hard to do. You just got to be a little bit careful. It's also quite difficult to do on camera, but it's not difficult to do in person because you can actually move it around however you like. But in camera, it's weird because I'm trying to stay in frame and I'm trying to stay in focus. But it does require a little bit of strength, but not, you know, not as much as you would think. Done that. You can actually pull them one page at a time, or you can pull it a whole bunch of pages at a time. But I like to do just a handful of pages at a time, and just hold on to a handful of pages, and very gently, you'll see the glue there, and you want to hold one hand here and another hand up here. And you just want to be a little bit careful because you don't want to tear the page. Let's see if I can show you how to do this. So you don't want to tear the page. Great. So now you have basically, now you've pretty much removed the binding, and then now it's a lot easier to go back in, and I'm just going to use this sheet as a test sheet to go back in and individually just tear out an individual sheet as you need it. I like to keep them in these little mini books because they're a little bit easier to keep track of, but you don't have to. A friend of mine, Laura, and I will link to her Instagram. She did beautiful with this. She did beautiful work with this using Copics and colored pencils. So but I'll give you a link to her Instagram so you can see her coloring that, so you can see the, you know, the results that she got. But you can see, just the trick with this is to have enough pages but not too many pages. And you can do it one page at a time, but I find it a little bit easier to do a few pages at a time. So you can see with this kind of a book, it's fairly easy. I'm not going to do the whole book, but I just wanted to do a few times so I can show you and then let you know as I do this, so I can remember if there's anything. The thing is to keep in mind, you can feel the paper if it's going to tear. So you just have to be mindful of it not tearing. And just go slow. That's the trick, is to go slow. Don't try to like force it out, because then that's how you'll end up tearing a page. This is probably too few. All right. And then this is going to be the last that I'm going to do. You may find it helpful. So like, let's say you get to this point. I'm going to set these aside. I like to be, even though I took it out of the binding, I do like to keep it in the original order. It may be helpful, like when I've done this, I have taken scissors to it and just cut off some of this glue. Just make sure you don't, you know, actually cut off the paper. This is just some of this, you know, adhesive used to actually bind the book, and I just take some of it out because then it's a little bit easier to get the pages going. So it's a little bit easier that way. Trying not to block your view. All right, there you go. There you go. So you can see that, like, as I'm not going to show you the whole book, but the same thing that you do with the front cover, you do with the back cover, and it's pretty easy to do. So once you know how to do this kind of book, so this is the easiest kind to do, and then you can keep it on here like this and use this like a little folder. All right, now this one is a little bit harder to do. There's more steps to this one than to the other one that I just showed you. So with this, the first thing you have to do, and you already have seen it, is you have to go and find those little mini books that we talked about earlier, and you have to find where the center is. All right, once again, I have the center of the right one to cut, and I may have to switch to my Swiss Army knife. Nope. And this just comes right out. And you just got to be a little, you know, you just got to be careful, because sometimes you do end up getting that that thing over there, the next page. And you repeat this until you have removed all the stitches for each mini book inside of your bound coloring book. So I'm going to go and remove each one, and then I will be back to show you what the next step is after that. All right, so I have removed the binding. I have removed the I've done the cutting along here, but then I switched from the scissors and got my Swiss Army knife, which is a lot easier to do. Just gotta make sure. I think there's usually 2 threads or 3 depending on the book, and you just gotta make sure you get both of them or all 3 of them, or however many it is. Okay, so that's the last for this book. And now you can see that for the most part the binding is gone, except for the stuff in the middle. Now this is going to be a little bit more oh no, this is going to be easier to do. This is going to be a little bit more challenging, but it's totally doable. I like doing it in this order because it was a lot easier to get done. Because now what you have to do is you have to take the page, the section that is still stuck, and you have to remove both the glue and the binding very, very carefully. So I just took the sheet out because I was feeling myself tearing it a little bit. It looks like it's starting to work a little bit, is to take the adhesive off from here. Every book is a little bit different, that's why you're seeing me struggle a little bit, but with this book it looks like it's easier to just take the adhesive out this end. So that's what I'm going to do. I will take a pause and see if I can gut the adhesive out. The other book that I did, it was easier to pull the sheet out, but in this case I'm just going to cut along here. Whew, that was a little difficult. That was a little bit more difficult than I thought. It was hard to do on camera, but now that I have this off camera, this was definitely easier to do off camera. All right, so now I believe from this point on we can pretty much do this similar to the way that we did the other book in terms of removing the binding. Yep, it's gonna come out similar to the way we did the first book, in terms of how this is gonna come out. And once again, you just got to be super careful and go super slow, and it came out the same way, so I don't lose track of where the pages were. I'm putting this back in. I'm pretty serious about making sure that I keep it in the original order, because otherwise, especially with these double-sided books, it turns into a little bit of a mess. All right, so then this is the inside portion of that book. I hope you guys can see me sort of just, this is a little bit of a puzzle too, so if you were never that good at puzzles, there you go. So now this is going to come out kind of sort of like the way the first book we did comes out. It helps me to have my thumb back here because I can use that a little bit to keep it from tearing. There you go. And this goes in. All right, so you can see the string from that we cut earlier, and hopefully you can see why I wanted to do the string part first, and I'm totally glad I did do the string part first. So once again, take that part aside, make sure I have just the 2 sheets very carefully. So the starting part, I think, is the worst part. There you go. So once you get it and it's, you know, it's a clean cut, then it's a little bit easier to get out. I hope this isn't a boring thing to watch. By the way, if you aren't going to be watching the upcoming videos, I'm doing a video. I am doing a video which I have actually already filmed, the luminance, and at the very end of that luminance I'm going to be doing the Crayola Twistables in the same video as the luminance, because my friend Amy wanted me to this is a work in progress. This is the Albert Durr and Polychromos together. She wanted me to review the Crayola Twistables, and they weren't on my list, so I added them to my list. So apparently that's something that I do now. So if you want me to review something and it's not on my Amazon wish list, just send me an email and I'll add it to my list. You know, and then I will review it. I told her I already did a review on the regular Crayolas, but she said she knows, but she wants me to do the Twistables. So I did the Twistables. See that? I try to keep my fans happy. And there we go. Alright, so I am going to pause again, finish it up, and we will look through this just very quickly with both books completely done. Right, we are done. So this book has been completely unbound. Now I would probably, if I were actually going to use this book right now, I'd tear this page off and use it for either testing or for the back of previous pages. If you want to, since this was removed in sections, if you want to, you can easily remove individual pages in this way. I do sometimes, and I don't other times. It really depends on my mood and my feeling towards, you know, any individual page. But so there's that for this book. So or books like it, you know, if books are bound in this way. Okay, so now for the other kind of binding. So now you have, hold on, let me use this example. So now you have these books that are like this, and they sort of become this giant spread. Now this book has a giant 2-page spread like this, and so I would probably leave this as is and not touch that binding at all. Like I probably would leave this as is, color it as is, and probably you know, depending on how I do, either frame it, you know, like this, or just, you know, store it in the binder, whatever I decide to do with this. So I probably will not touch this page and leave this as is. But something like this, I probably would definitely cut up because I can use these individual panels for practice or whatever I need to do. So for this, when you get to these, they are fairly easy to remove because then the staple holes that were here and the dividing, it sort of works a little bit like perforation. You still have to be careful, but you can just very easily just sort of go in, you know, in small sections. You can either do this by hand like this, or you can get a pair of scissors and cut them, and you can do that throughout the entire book for any page that you want to split up. If you don't want to split them up and you want to keep them as a whole like this, you totally can. If you do want to split it up, you totally can as well. So I hope that this video was helpful in showing you how to carefully and easily remove the binding yourself for any one of a number of different purposes that people have when they want to have the book available in the just individual sheets like that. So there is that, and I hope you guys found this video helpful, and I will see you guys next time. Next time, as I mentioned earlier, the video will be Luminance and Crayola Twistables. So that will be next time. Once again, thank you so much for the patrons. If you have not joined me over on Patreon, please consider doing so. Your support helps make this channel and videos like this possible. And I will see you guys next time, and stay tuned for a kitten video. All right, bye. Oh, who's your buddy? Who's your buddy? Who's your buddy? Who's your good buddy? Who's your good buddy?